Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here, for checking out the series. Of course, you know what to do if you like what you see, what you hear. Hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, so it's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I'm so excited to finally talk with one of my favorite all-time artists. Reggie Watts is back, and you've got a lot going on. New special, Nevermind, new book, Great Falls, Montana. Hello, hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm really good. Yeah.
Seriously, I spent the weekend with your voice, both with this special and this book, and I don't know if they intentionally work together because I in my mind they all sort of work together, going from the '80s and into the '90s and this whole thing. Uh, and I mean, it's just fine tuning a creative time. What spurred this little bit here?
It was just kind of synchronicity, really. The book was, obviously it takes a while to make, and then it came out, late last year in October, and yeah, and then the special. I don't think I really knew about that until maybe November or maybe December or something like that. Yeah, so it just like was a coincidence,
Yeah.
really. I got lucky.
um, After I finished the book and realizing once again what the coincidence of timing, I really did want to ask you if you've seen the Bratz documentary yet, and what you might have thought about that.
Oh no, I need to see that. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I saw the trailer for it. Yeah, I really want it. Did you see it?
I have seen it. I've had Andrew McCarthy on here talking about it, and I've had Anthony
Whoa,
Michael Hall, who's not in the series, who's not in the documentary
which
at
is
all,
weird.
which is weird.
Yeah.
He said no, I guess,
Oh, okay,
but
okay.
I love for those watching and listening. Basically, every single time you need to equate one of life's moments to something, you tend to always turn to a Brat Pack movie, which is just sort of beautiful.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I think it's rare. Maybe there. I don't know if there. It'd be interesting if someone could kind of go in historically and see if this is true or not. But I think that Gen X would be the only generation to grow up with a series of movies specifically about them. And so, like, kind of about them, but also creating the culture simultaneously. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I can't think of another, the 70s or the 60s. I mean, obviously, it's like Rebel Without a Cause and stuff like that, but the emotional depth wasn't the same. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting, but they're just easy to refer to because they are such a huge part of most of my friends' lives. Growing up around that time period.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely did paint everything, but that's what I mean. Like, it's interesting in the timing too, because they are all making peace with it. They're talking about doing a St. Elmo's reunion movie,
Whoa,
and
whoa, that would be.
take the worst of the movies and say that's the one
I
with the sequel.
know, I know, not that one. Like I don't think you could redo Breakfast Club. I don't think there's no point in that. But I don't know of any of the movies that maybe Ferris Bueller's Day, but I don't know how you'd even do that. I don't know.
So John
Yeah,
Hughes
hard.
was working on a Breakfast Club sequel when he died.
What?
Yeah.
What was it?
I learned
Like
that
to
from
take
Anthony Michael
college?
Hall. Yeah, well, it's one of those let's catch up with everybody later was going to
I
be
see.
but I don't think anything was ever written, but that he had the idea. That's what he was already sort of tooling with it. I don't maybe it's okay that that never got made.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine like what are you gonna get? I mean, I guess if it would have hit in the '90s, like in the mid to later '90s, I guess that could have been interesting. But it still probably would have felt like a reach, or just to do it, not because it needed to be done or something like that. I don't know,
Did
but
you ever
interesting to know.
yeah, did you ever see the Richard Linklater movie Suburbia? It was one of kind of his smaller, lesser known movies.
Oh, like the post punk
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing in LA. Yeah, I did see that. It was excellent.
Yeah, see, that might have been what the Breakfast Club sequel would have looked like.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
That would have been kind of cool, actually.
So this special, never mind, finds you on stage, and I hope you don't mind me talking about a little bit about the premise. But this whole time, it's you from the '90s, as we're talking about the '90s. This spot, this like somewhat unspecific point that seems like in the middle late '90s, and a look at the future from there. And I love that of course you don't set that up. You don't spell it out for people. And watching the audience and myself, because I didn't read anything about it going into it. I mean, I think when you show up to a Reggie Watts show, there's a bit of Jesus take the wheel. Um, you do you, and we'll catch up with you.
Yeah.
Um, when you've got something like this, like, is there a birth of an idea that kind of launched how this turned out the way it did?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've always really been into the yeah, I've just been into time travel in general. And so I'm always looking for an excuse to do some form of time travel. And and I think with this, I loved the idea. Just like one day, just kind of popped into my head. But I love the idea of like making a special, like doing comedy specials that take place in specific time periods. So like something that I was calling like temporal comedy specials, and uh, and so this is kind of like a first crack at it. It's not as like hardcore as like can imagine doing it, because I'd love to do a special that takes place in like the early 80s and get like the wardrobe perfect and the lighting perfect and use similar cameras and get everybody in like wardrobe, like really go for it and make it like like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood level of
Yeah.
period piece and like 4:3 aspect ratio, all that stuff. um but yeah, and so because of that, I was like, well, maybe I could try something along those lines, with this special. And so, yeah, so I was like, yeah, might as well make it about the 90s. Like a lot of my friends, a lot of my Gen Z friends are like really into the 90s. And that was a time period I lived in and know about and was around in Seattle at that time. And that was kind of leading culture a lot in many ways. And so yeah, so I thought, well, why not? Let's just go for it. I'll just set it up as that, and then I'll just kind of riff on whatever I think that is when I perform.
And that's what you're doing. Like, that's the other part of it, because you talk about this a lot in your book, like how you found your comedic voice and the way that it got there. But when you're on that stage, it's hard to tell, from at least my point of view, like how much is planned. Like you make it look easy. So either it is easy or you work really, really hard at making it look easy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does make sense. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it feels pretty easy in that I'm just kind of you know, just kind of saying out loud what I'm thinking inside and just putting it out there. And that kind of leads me to other stuff. And a lot of it is like stuff that I've thought about a lot, like thoroughly, like, the effect of bands like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and, Screaming Trees and bands like that, like the effect that it had on society, or like, Jane's Addiction's Ritual de l'Habitual coming out, and how that affected my generation at that time, and um, what music became, and then the introduction of technology and early internet and all that stuff. Those are all things that I've talked about at length, with many, many friends. And and I find it endlessly fascinating, and I think we're still kind of figuring out, well, what did all of it mean in many ways, because there's not really that many documentaries on the 90s, like proper documentaries, I don't think. And so it's always been something that's been rolling around in my mind. And since the 90s have been coming up, and I'm seeing like younger generations picking up on some of the trends from the 90s, it's like giving me flashbacks and reminding me of things going on. And so it felt like a great opportunity to really indulge that time period and really just kind of pour into it a bit. And yeah, there's just a lot of energy for me behind that idea.
Yeah. And again, I'll say this, it was so perfectly timed for everything. Because the story you're telling, it's going to end up being a lot of people's stories in various little parts of it. I mean, your story is your own, but Chris Cornell changed my life. Everything that happened to me in my life, in my professional life, and everything else happened because a girl on a bus put some headphones over my ears and Spoon Man erupted. And like that was it. Like, so to hear not only your story of being a part of it, but then to find this fun, as you say, time traveling version of it, where all I have to do is lay back and pretend, yeah, he's there. Like he's there because it, and I guess this goes back to the way you perform. Like, do you think that you're tapping into something? Because everything is so comfortable and relaxed. For anybody to perform good improv on stage, you have to have that comfort and relaxation. But for the weirding, as I think you've talked about, to happen, like, are you tapping into anything that you can tell?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think you have starter ideas, and these starter ideas allow you to, to begin to create momentum and an idea that you're trying to convey. And I think the rest of it has to do with the feeling that you're getting from the audience, how they're responding from things and things that you think of that are triggered from that. So it's like this kind of like feedback response that you're getting from the audience. And that might jar my memory to be like, oh yeah, remember mini disc players? Oh yeah, let's talk about that, and then some people recognizing it, or like I love in the special, I definitely kind of go on and on about some things that I know the audience doesn't know anything. Like they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But I love assuming that they do.
Mm-hmm.
There's like something hilarious to me, just like keep pushing as though, yeah, they're on board. They know exactly as much as I know about this. And so I'll feed off of that energy too. So it's like this, it is a dialogue with like what's in my mind, being open, it will start being open, starting with something that's interesting or dumb, and then whatever's in my mind, and then what I'm feeling from the environment and the audience at the same time. So it's like it's all of that kind of working in conjunction, and then me just kind of surfing on it is essentially is what it feels like.
Yeah. But isn't that great that even if they don't know what you're talking about, they're with you again, like they do know, like they even like,
Yeah,
yeah, sure, I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, that's what I love about it. That's what's so hilarious, because they're just like, I don't, but continue. I'm just going to assume that I do.
Yeah, right. On the music side of thing, when you're up there, and again, here you are in this improv moment. How often do you mess around and realize that whatever you're doing is insanely good? Like, do you ever afterwards go, I really need to go back to the tapes and finish that song?
you know, yeah. I mean, sometimes, yes, for sure. Like I'll a loop will happen, and I'll build something, and I'm like, wow, that actually felt really good. That's really good energy. I do save loops. I can save loops because of the nature of how the machine works. I can save stuff that I like. So I do have them saved. And then, obviously if it's recorded, then I'll have the whole performance. It's not going to be like going into a recording studio where I can like chop up all the different things. It's just one recording, but the idea is preserved, and I do have the loops from that idea. So there is something that I could do with it. But yeah, generally to answer the question, like, yeah, of course there's like things. How often have I actually made something into, a song from performance? Very, 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 very rarely. But I do want to practice that more seriously going forward for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think if you maybe it was the first full song that you did. It lasted a while. And I just kept thinking, like, I want this song. I also want him to go back to the chorus. I don't know, chorus.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Because you
yeah.
created a chorus and then you dub it
You
out.
forgot about
It
it.
goes, like, take it back, man. Put that together. Oh man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's but like that's that whole music. So because and again, I know I'm jumping back and forth between your special and your book because again, it all
No,
sort
it's
of
fine.
lives in my head on this one piece.
I get
but
it.
but music is something that we connect to is the most strong when we're young, and especially those coming of age years. But it seems like it's still a language for you in a way. Do you find that it's still that you have like as strong a connection as you might have back, in your teen years?
Oh, for sure, easily. I mean, it's different in the teen year. I've obtained teen year. No, I in my teen years, I think music means a lot more in a different way, in that it, like I remember listening to uh Simply Red's picture book, and thinking like, what is this mood? Like it has such a strong influence on on like a different kind of like it exposed me to a different way of feeling life, or listening to the Water Boys for the first time, or um or Living Color, or just there's just, I think music, because also it's a different media landscape. It's like both, like you're coming of age, you're not in the workforce yet, but you're right in that middle area. So there's like a bunch of things happening and the time period. But for me, I think music had a bigger impact on my worldview back then. I think now it's super important to me because it still creates worlds. Like I'll hear something like the Maria's new album, Submarine, and I'll listen to that and I'll be like, oh my God, this is like an incredible album from first song to the end. And it just puts me in a zone and in a space that, is inspiring and lets me let go. And so I still have that with music, and it still does, it can shift things, for sure, but it's not quite the same as like, yeah, when you're a teenager and you listen to Duran Duran for the first time, and you're like, "What is this? Oh no, what's happening right now? Everything's changing." Um, but yeah, it's still super important for me. Like I think now I find it, I'm a little bit more lonely in the way that I listen to music, because many of the people, like my girlfriend and many of my friends around me, aren't necessarily musicians, and so when a song is playing and I'm like, oh, listen to that tambourine part, or do you hear the way the hi-hat
Mhm.
is going in and out, and they're adding a little bit of an effect here, they don't know what I'm talking about. And so I feel like I kind of, many times I'll kind of tamp down my excitement over things, because I, not that they wouldn't understand, it's just it's not innate to them,
Sure.
so I can't point out every single thing that I'm experiencing to them
Yeah.
without being annoying.
I get that with my wife as well. A
Oh, there
lot
you
of
go.
the time. But that's like, because I keep going back and forth on, I'll tell musicians a lot of the time, like there's actual magic in that song. Somehow there's magic in that song. Everybody wants to rule the world. There's something about that song that has actual magic in it. I am sure of it. But when you talk to those
Favorite song.
guys, they're like, yeah, man, we just like punched two chords on a keyboard over and over, and we didn't really think much about it. Like the difference of
Yeah.
what happens in the studio or
Yes.
in your bedroom or whatever versus how we hear it is something
Yes.
I still can't figure out, you know.
It's really weird. Yeah, I know that, because that song is like, that's one of my favorite songs. I think it's one of the most perfect pop songs ever created. Um, and just so it's like both like triumphant, anthemic. Just has one of my favorite solos in it. It's 6/4 time signature. It's just so good. That song is so good. And of course, like it's so often that creators are kind of a little, not dismissive, but they don't really have that same relationship to it, because obviously they were involved in the process of making it. But um, yeah, those types of songs and those types of moments and the impact that they have oftentimes are divorced from their source, like where they came from. But I think like I think so. I mean, I think my favorite thing is like, if I were to ever make something, or sometimes when I make things and people like, it had this effect on me, even though I felt like, oh, it was just something that fell out during a performance and I wasn't really thinking much of it. I at least try to come at it from their perspective to see like why would it have had that, so I'll ask questions, and oftentimes I will see it and I'll be like, oh, that's so wonderful. It's like, that's what you hope for as an artist, that people find something about what you make, they receive it in a way that you would have never imagined, and now you've gained even more insight into what you created.
Doug, it's Inception in a way. I mean, you are digging deep into
Mm-hmm.
someone's, whateverness, and just
Yeah,
planting what
yeah,
you create. You see that in they're dancing in the special,
yeah,
those girls that are
yeah,
just losing themselves in that moment.
yeah,
Like you can see it in their face. Like that's in
yeah,
them. Like that's,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That is magic. I mean, for sure. I mean, the idea of magic. It's just something that happens with very, with no one's telling people to do stuff. It's just happening. It just happens, and whatever that energy, whatever gets into people and makes them like respond in that way, is like, you can't really duplicate it. It's only organic,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it amazing.
I do love those moments in this special. And again, and even in the book, like where you take that story again for some of us who are like just loving to hear about the era, but loving to hear about how you created the art and how you found your way. I'm a dad. I got a 16-year-old, and hearing that you went through your issues and the troubled years and found a way out, and I think that's important. I mean, that's I grabbed onto that. It's like I'm not having quite those issues, or with him, but it's like, you know what though? These kids are all right. They're gonna be fine. It's like hearing you talk about, and then by the way, and leaving us in tears at the end of it, and I don't mean it lightly in any way, was so beautifully told and painted. It's not a question, it's only a compliment.
Appreciate that.
um it's a hell of a story, and you set it up. Is it going to be do you want to do another, because you take us through a little bit of what would another story look like
Mhm.
do you want to do that book? Do you want to tell that story in depth?
100%. Yeah, I definitely want my plan is to do the next one. It'll just be the cities I lived in. So the next one will be Seattle,
Mhm.
and then the one after that, New York, and then after that, Los Angeles. So yeah, because I want to. My thing is like after writing the first book, the most important thing for me was just getting across like how important those years were for me. In my teen years in high school, and to share that story. But I think with Seattle and New York, it's like so many things have happened in my life that I think if I list them down, people are like, "There's no way all that should happen to you." Yeah, there's no way. That's impossible. How? When did you find the time? Like that kind of stuff. And so I want to kind of take people through that history, and to show like how through time those things came to be. And I think that would be very, very interesting for people to experience. And it would be nice for me to to revisit stories and corroborate them with people back then, now, and just try to, because I like creating like a really detailed timeline of my life. And I think like doing things like books and stuff, it gives you an excuse to like really go for it, and to just have like a sense of your life, to think about all. I mean, we've all done so many things. It doesn't matter how boring someone thinks they are. A lot of shit has happened to everybody. And I think that there's something really empowering about going back and trying to like tease out all the moments that, came to make you who you are today.
Well, I certainly do hope that you continue that, because I will definitely be reading it or listening to it on 1.5, whatever comes the easiest at the time.
Yeah, 1.5. I like it. 2
But
2.0. Fuck it, man. Two
I
times,
need
man.
there to be some humanity in your voice, and then and
Yeah, I
every
get
time you do music, yeah, every time you do music, then I have to like quickly like slow it down.
Yes, right.
It's like, no, I got to hear that.
Yeah, they need to create a setting where it's like just talking,
Right.
music, normal speed.
But I also really hope that you continue this time traveling through the stand-up specials too. When you said about the early 80s, everything about the 80s, you were talking about the lighting and all that.
Yeah.
My image for every single one of them is the way light comes through blinds at nighttime, reflecting on the
True.
wall. That's
Yeah.
the image of every bit of the 80s right there. Light coming through blinds at nighttime.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, louvered shades. Yeah, like a little bit of fog or haze and like
Right.
beams of light. Yeah, of course. Everything was dramatic. It was like all influenced by noir.
Mhm.
It's like 80s noir. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I love what you're doing. I've always loved what you've been doing. Reggie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it. Seriously, it's been a real pleasure.
Oh man, pleasure for me too. I'm stoked. I'm stoked. I'm glad we got to do this.
And thanks to my guest. Also, thanks to you for checking out the episode in the series. Before you get out of here, hit that subscribe button. Again, you get 3 brand new interviews every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at right here on YouTube, or of course anywhere in podcast land, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, NPR, or WFPK.org as well. A great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover new ones as well. Then after that, actually head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Facebook, Instagram, mostly on Twitter. all three of them. The address is at Kyle Meredith. Do hope you like and follow along. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.